One thing we've been very clear on in Iowa is that we do plan to be first in the nation with our First in the Nation caucuses.
Today we learned that the Iowa Republican Party has settled on a tentative date for their First in the Nation caucuses. Tentative date, January 3rd. That's the date party officials have agreed to, which means the process of voting for president officially begins on the third day of 2012, which means we will be voting for president for 10 months. And so now, more than a year before the election, campaign season is already well underway. Campaign season, it turns out, is basically forever now. And that leaves politicians of both parties with hardly any time in office to do what they are supposed to do between elections, which is, of course, raising money. New estimates out this week are that TV ads alone for the 2012 election will total more than $3 billion. We're told to expect that almost $250 million of that will come just from Karl Rove's group, the American Crossroads Groups, which announced last month that they were doubling their fundraising goal to $240 million. 92% of the millions they raised this year so far was from 3 people, 3 zillionaires. So that fundraising isn't going to be very hard. Welcome to Post-Citizens United America, where every season is campaign season, where every campaign season is driven by cash, and where there is so much cash, the cash only counts if you can divide it into $100 million increments. We are not much for public intellectuals in this country. We have celebrities and politicians and activists, but public intellectuals, we do not have many. Lawrence Lessig is one of the few public intellectuals that we have as a nation. Today, the way you can tell that is because now, on the occasion of his profound and comprehensive new book on the routine corruption of money in politics, Lawrence Lessig's talks about money in politics are being remixed with video of the Occupy Wall Street protests for explanation and for inspiration.
The framers of our Constitution gave us a republic, a representative democracy, a democracy to be dependent upon the people alone. Now here's the problem. Members of Congress spending between 30 and 70% of their time raising money to get back to Congress. 75% of Americans believe, quote, money buys results in Congress. 11% of Americans have confidence in Congress. 11%. Just think what that means. There were more people who believed in King George III at the time of the Revolution than who believe in our Congress today.
Joining us tonight for the interview is Lawrence Lessig. He's a professor at Harvard Law School and the author of the new book, Republic Lost: How Money Corrupts Congress and a Plan to Stop It. Professor Lessig, I've been nervous and excited to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here.
It's really great to be here.
I am a fan of yours.
Me too.
Oh.
Of you.
Well, let's just leave that alone. The process of raising money, the amount of time that it takes, the proportion of a member of Congress's life that is taken up by the pursuit of campaign money in order to stay a member of Congress. Is the money process itself what corrupts, or is it specifically about where the money comes from?
I think it's both. You know, the first thing to recognize is that this corruption is not the kind of Rod Blagojevich corruption. This is not criminal activity. These are decent people. They're just trying to live in a terrible system. But as they spend their time, 30 to 70% of their time trying to raise money, it begins to shapeshift them. And they constantly are aware how anything they might do will affect their ability to raise money. Leslie Byrne, a Democrat from Virginia, describes that when she went to Congress, she was told, quote, always lean to the green. And then to clarify, she continued, he was not an environmentalist, right? So the point is, they recognize exactly how they can raise the most money, and that begins to affect exactly the policies that they pursue.
Is there any opting out option for a member of Congress? If somebody gets elected to Congress because of something other than a ton of money, or maybe even because of a ton of money, once they get there, can they opt out and survive as a member of Congress if they choose not to do the fundraising thing?
Well, probably not. But the one big pressure that increasingly they have is a tax from their own party. Members have to raise money for their party as well as for themselves. So the constant focus of Democratic policy or Republican policy is actually a focus on the capacity of members to continue to raise money so that the party can regain control or to maintain control. So the shift, and you talk to people like Jim Cooper, a Democrat from Tennessee, who described for me Congress as a farm league for K Street. The shift from a Congress that was really working out policy issues to a Congress that is really working out fundraising issues is profound. And it's really just in the last 20 years. This is not something that was true 30 years ago.
And that is a really important point, I think, in terms of not feeling hopeless about it and angry about it in an impotent way, that it wasn't always this way and it doesn't have to be this way. What got us to this point, and as you say, in a relatively recent time frame?
Yeah, so Newt Gingrich got us to this point. When the Republicans took over control of the House, and the House and the Senate, and then Congress was up for grabs, it created huge competition for both parties to continue to keep control. And leadership in both parties began to demand not leadership on policy issues, but leadership on the capacity to raise money. So they became full-time fundraisers, spending the vast majority of their time focused on this issue rather than focused on the issues that are important to America. And that has had a profound effect, not just on what Congress does. I mean, there's a great story in Huffington Post about how in the first 6 months of the year, the #1 issue that Congress focused on, in the middle of 2 wars, huge unemployment problem, huge deficit problem, but the #1 issue was the bank swipe fee issue. And why was that? That was because if you dance around with $19 billion on the table and act like you're coy, not quite sure which way to go, money begins to rain down on top of your campaign. So the whole agenda of Congress gets driven by the issues that will raise the most money. So you wonder why we don't pay attention to unemployment. Turns out unemployment doesn't raise a lot of money for congressmen in their campaigns.
The proscriptive element of your book, I think, the diagnostic part of it is fascinating, and you are legendary for being able to explain things well, and this sort of tightly constrained use of visual media, even in the book, is really helpful. But it is the prescriptive part of it that I think makes this important. And I mean, not to be too long-winded, but it's essentially, I feel, both good and bad about it. I am buoyed by the fact that you see this not as good members of Congress and bad members of Congress, but a bad system. And that seems to give some hope that it could have a, as you say, cross-partisan solution. We could solve it both from anger with left and right. But the thing that I'm worried about is that I feel like all of the potential solutions that all have to do with, public financing instead of private financing of campaigns, I feel like they're all being precluded by the Supreme Court.
Well, the solution that I describe here, a kind of citizen-funded, small-dollar-funded election, would not be precluded, even by this Supreme Court, even under the recent Arizona decision. Okay. It's true that solutions that try to silence people or try to block the ability to speak, this Court has said those are off the table. But a system that said, so the proposal I have here is basically every voter has a $50 voucher, plus they can give $100 on top of that, and candidates who opt to take only $100 contributions can get the voucher money. That's if every voter had $50, that's $6 billion in an election cycle. That's 2.5 times the total amount raised and spent in the last congressional election. So that's real money, and that's completely constitutional, even under this Supreme Court's decision. The hard part, in my view, is not the Supreme Court. The hard part is the world inside the Beltway that depends upon a system where very small number of people fund campaigns so that lobbyists can leverage that influence to sell more lobbying services and therefore sell more access to members of Congress. Those people, that business, gets crushed if we had a system where the funders were actually the people, and they will fight like hell against any change that undermines that power.
The idea that you can get around that with through bottom-up democratic means is radical and interesting and presented in really concise form. And I'm not going to explain it now, A, because we're out of time, and B, because I think people should read the book. I'm glad that you are doing a heavy-duty book tour promoting this, because you are a good communicator about this, and it's definitely important. I had Buddy Roemer on the show talking about these issues, and I can't tell you what an incredible response we had from our viewers for hearing Buddy Roemer of all people talking about these people, and you tell his story and this overall story so well. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
I know you could be doing a lot of different things, and thanks.
I appreciate it.
Lawrence Lessig is the author. The book is called Republic Lost: How Money Corrupts Congress and a Plan to Stop It.